Keir Starmer's visit to Washington is underway. He's arrived in the capital. He's already being, the visit was already being framed as one of the most consequential meetings between a British Prime Minister and a US President since the Second World War, and the stakes are high. Russia, long recalcitrant in its aggression, is showing signs, however faint, of considering an EU-led peacekeeping force in Ukraine. And Lavrov's remarks in Ankara, carefully phrased, hint, as I was suggesting yesterday, of a shift in Moscow's posture. Starmer, meanwhile, is attempting to balance diplomacy with firm resolve, advocating a European-led defence framework while simultaneously pressing Trump to maintain an American backstop to any settlement. Speaking en route to Washington, Starmer made clear that Russia remains the aggressor, and his insistence that Ukraine must be central to any negotiations is a direct response to Trump's recent overtures towards Moscow, which notably exclude Kyiv and European powers. If the UK Prime Minister hopes to prevent another Minsk-style agreement that merely buys Putin time, he must assert that any ceasefire will be underwritten by meaningful security guarantees. And of course, part of this thing is the debate and the extraordinary flowering of nonsense on YouTube, where a deflection about the US being to blame for Ukraine's violation. This is really a distraction technique, and it is shocking to see it playing out in real time. The reality that needs to be established very clearly. It doesn't matter how badly or how well the US has performed, and I'm certainly no advocate for US policies. What matters is that Russia is acknowledged as the aggressor. And the problem here is that Trump remains deeply unenthusiastic about any long-term American military commitment, and his latest remarks suggesting Europe should take the lead in securing peace underscore his reluctance. And in contrast, Emmanuel Macron has already positioned France as willing to contribute peacekeeping troops. Starmer, while not ruling out a British deployment, has stopped short of specifics, likely wary of domestic backlash and the optics of entangling the UK in another prolonged military engagement. And also, as Kemi Badenoch was trying to push yesterday, and in such a clumsy and cack-handed manner, Starmer's very carefully worded commitment to raising the defence spending in Britain doesn't rule out that the Chagos Island deal could be partly funded through the defence budget. Lavrov's statement in Ankara yesterday, ruling out British and French peacekeepers while conspicuously failing to reject EU forces outright, suggests a calculated ambiguity. And Moscow's historic distrust of NATO would naturally make a European-led security arrangement possible, providing it doesn't include direct NATO command structures. If the Kremlin is indeed considering peacekeepers, it reflects a tacit admission that the Russian war aims have faltered, and the costs of sustaining occupation and fending off Western-backed Ukrainian forces may be pushing Moscow towards a face-saving settlement. But Russia's openness to EU peacekeepers doesn't necessarily mean it intends to negotiate in good faith. It may well be a tactical play to splinter the West's unity. And by engaging with European leaders while sidelining Washington, Moscow could be seeking to drive a wedge between an EU eager for stability and an American administration still grappling with its commitment and the cost of supporting Ukraine. Starmer's most immediate challenge is securing US commitment to underwriting any future peace deal. And without an American security guarantee, any European-led initiative risks being toothless. And Trump's recent remark, "I'm not going to make security guarantees beyond very much," suggests he's unwilling to extend anything resembling a NATO Article 5 style commitment. Instead, his focus appears to be on leveraging Ukraine's mineral wealth, with reports indicating that Kyiv is set to sign a major resources deal with Washington on Friday. This economic dimension adds an additional layer of complexity, and while European leaders focus on military security, Trump views the situation through the lens of American strategic interests, namely securing preferential access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals. And if Starmer wishes to persuade Trump of the necessity of an US backstop, he may need to frame it not as an act of transatlantic solidarity, but as a means of securing long-term American influence over a post-war Ukraine. Because, of course, Ukraine will need to be rebuilt, and somebody is going to have to foot that bill, and somebody is also going to benefit from the enormous infrastructure which will be put up and which will be erected over the next few years to sustain a modern, reinvigorated Ukraine. For Starmer, this high-stakes diplomacy carries risks back home. A new YouGov poll, kindly published by Guido Fawkes, shows just 23% of Britons believe he will be effective in negotiating with Trump, while 57% predict failure. And his decision to cut foreign aid to fund defence spending, seen as a necessary response to Trump's demands, has already alienated some within Labour's ranks, as Diane Abbott demonstrated yesterday in her very odd question, which wasn't quite a question. Additionally, Starmer's approach to Russia could be complicated by domestic economic concerns. The UK's increased defence spending comes at a time when public services are under strain, and while the Prime Minister insists he intends to restore foreign aid to 0.5% of GDP when economic conditions allow, this is unlikely to placate critics who see his move as a capitulation to Trump's transactional approach to international relations. Another potential flashpoint during Starmer's visit to the UK, is the UK's controversial decision to hand the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. And Trump's stance here remains unclear, but given Diego Garcia's strategic importance as a US military base, Washington's reaction could complicate broader discussions on security cooperation. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy's admission that the White House effectively holds a veto over the deal underscores the extent to which the UK remains reliant on American goodwill. And if Trump decides to make an issue of it, Starmer could find himself embroiled in a diplomatic mess of his own making. Starmer's Washington visit comes at a turning point in the Ukraine conflict, and while Russia potentially is opening the door to an EU peacekeeping force, bombed Kyiv last night, I think 2 people died, and Trump is seeking to shift responsibility onto European allies, the Prime Minister faces a delicate balancing act. His challenge is twofold. He has to persuade Trump to maintain a meaningful US role in Europe while ensuring that there is European unity in the face of Russian manoeuvring. And if Starmer can navigate these treacherous waters, he may emerge strengthened as a statesman. If he fails, he risks confirming domestic skepticism about his ability to hold his own on the world stage. Either way, what happens in Washington this week will reverberate far beyond the White House and Downing Street.